Hi, my name is Leslie Anderson, and the title of my research proposal is Experimental Study on the Impact of Cognitive Biases and Digital Misinformation Exposure on Outgroup Trust Across Age Groups. My research explores how psychological biases and misinformation influence the way people perceive and trust outgroups in digital spaces. This problem is real and measurable, and my study examines how false or biased social media content strengthens pre-existing biases and reduces trust towards outgroups. So as you can see in that first bullet, misinformation spreads 70% faster than factual news, especially when it's emotionally laden or salient. And if its purpose is to make us fearful or angry, it spreads even faster. 88% of adults see it as a major problem that is not improving. Public trust continues to decline, and these trends make the psychology behind misinformation more urgent to study than ever. 32%, which is a pretty small number, in a recent, just last year, poll, a Gallup poll, said they trust social media news sources, which means 68% of Americans in the same poll did not. Along that same line, 64% of Americans say social media negatively affects society. So cognitive biases like confirmation bias and outgroup homogeneity effect distort how we interpret this information. And these forces all taken together create distrust and polarization between social groups. The research question and hypotheses. My research question is there a difference between exposure to misinformation, balanced information, and neutral content in levels of trust and empathy toward outgroups across age groups? My alternative hypothesis is there is a difference between information conditions in trust and empathy levels. My null hypothesis is there is no significant difference between conditions. My study, to clarify, aims to measure differences rather than correlation, and I'll be using an experimental design to isolate the effect of misinformation. The first part of my lit review focuses on cognitive biases. And as you can see, the first one is confirmation bias. And this is when people accept information that confirms or proves their pre-existing beliefs. And another part that goes along with confirmation bias, just accepting what we already believe, is we're at the same time also ignoring information to the contrary. The outgroup homogeneity effect is particularly insidious as it leads to stereotyping, decreased empathy, discrimination, and social division. Basically, as an in-group, we are we and they are they. And while we are all very different, we can go around our in-group and discuss at length how different we all are when we look at people who we are not familiar with in any context. They become all the same or all alike, which leads to that increased stereotyping. These biases shape how we perceive and evaluate social information, especially online. And it really is affecting our critical thinking. Social media has made us less able, it seems like, to think critically. The second part of my lit review is about misinformation effects, and as the picture shows there, it's we're hearing real news and fake news, it seems, equally as often. And some recent studies have shown that repeated exposure to false statements increases perceived truth, even when people know and have been alerted that these are false. So this illusory truth effect is basically this repeated exposure to false statements, but it increases people's belief in the truth. Often this is due to, with repeated exposure, that information becomes more familiar, and more familiar information leads people to think that it must be true. False news travels faster and farther than true news, as I stated in my introduction, and this is due to the emotionality of it. And misinformation paired with our biases reinforces distrust and reduces empathy toward outgroups. So a theoretical framework is a very nice kind of, not so much a dovetailing, but a dominoes falling. One leads very nicely into the next. That our conceptual pathway starts with our biases, which everybody has. It's not a character flaw, but we often don't recognize our own biases. And this leads to misinformation, or this coupled with misinformation exposure might lead very likely to reinforced stereotypes and thus distrust and reduced empathy of outgroups. My method, including participants and design, I will have 150 total participants in 3 different age groups. I'll have a younger, a middle, and an older age group. And the design is going to be a between subjects experimental design, so there will be no crossing over, and they will be compared, the results, against each other. The sample size was determined via a power analysis, and the standard power analysis for a one-way ANOVA using these 3 conditions, and 3 age groups. The 150 total participants, 50 in each group, achieves adequate power, which is 0.80, to detect a medium effect size at 5% significance level, thus ensuring results are statistically significant and reliable without overextending the recruitment resources. The recruitment resources are going to be through schools, community centers, and online platforms in the United States. I'm hoping that using this many in my sample, as well as the recruitment, will ensure that I get a diverse sample. And the diversity of the sample can explore how age specifically influences susceptibility to misinformation. Stratified random sampling will be used to ensure this demographic diversity in terms of gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic background, religion, and it will, like it says, be focused on participants residing in the United States to ensure cultural and linguistic relevance to the selected media platforms and misinformation contexts. So there are, because it's an experiment and because we're looking at perhaps deceiving people with, depending on which group that they are assigned to, some ethical considerations that I need to consider, which is informed consent must be obtained from all participants. I must maintain confidentiality, so no identifying information will be collected. They will be protected from harm. So the posts that I'll talk about here in just a moment will be pre-tested to make sure that it's not too distressful. The accurate description of the study risks and the purpose in the consent form, and this is when they will be informed that they can leave at any time, and it is completely voluntary. And then after the fact, there will be a full debriefing provided, explaining the fabricated posts, results, and making sure that all of them are comfortable with the results of the study. And of course, IRB approval will be obtained before data collection. So with my variables and data collection, my independent variable is the type of information exposure. It's going to be measured using 3 groups. There'll be a misinformation group, and the posts that this group reads and views will include exaggerated or false claims. The second set of posts will be the balanced information condition, and they will be presented with neutral fact-checked information. And the third will be the control condition, or neutral, and this will be made up of unrelated neutral content, for example, posts about animals and nature. My dependent variable is going to be trust. So basically, I believe that trust depends on, more specifically, trust toward outgroups will depend on which group they are a part of. So if they are in the misinformation condition, the balanced information condition, or the neutral information condition. And this dependent variable, trust, will be measured using the intergroup trust scale, which you can see there in the visual. There are 5 dimensions: competence, integrity, compassion, compatibility, and security. And for example, competence would be trying to assess or assessing if the outgroup does things well. And of course, this would be measured again after they had looked at the posts. So each group will get 5 posts, and they will consist of a headline, a little bit of information, no more than 2 paragraphs, along with a visual. They will get 7.5 minutes, which means they'll have approximately 90 seconds per post. And so for a total of 7.5 minutes, because I thought that more than that, they might kind of give up. So 90 seconds per post seems doable. So my previous draft included empathy as another dependent variable, and I focused on trust because while I believe that they are both affected, I believe trust would be more affected and initially affected, and that again, with kind of this domino falling, that empathy would as a result or consequence be affected, but first I think trust would be the most important. So my hypothetical findings would be basically that if you focus on the trust scores, which I will be, and finding a mean in each age group, you can see that as you move from the misinformation group to the balanced to the control, that mean trust score increases. So with the lowest score at a 2.1 belonging to the misinformation group, that means that they are the least trustful. This would definitely include my ANOVA, my one-way ANOVA results, showing significant difference between the groups, being the p-value less than 0.01. So misinformation exposure leads to lowest trust, especially among older adults. All right, so the significance of the findings, hypothetical findings, basically means that misinformation does in fact decrease trust and as a result, empathy. The age differences, and this is supported by research, that older adults showed the strongest effects. So Lyons and Guess both state in their research that older adults are not only more likely to share misinformation online on platforms like Facebook, but also because of their decreased digital literacy, that's theorized why they might read something and then share it quickly without